Eddie, welcome to the podcast. We're going to start by jumping right into things. And I'd love to hear, when did you first feel something on either the spiritual level or just a time or memory where you felt connected to something bigger than yourself?
So, to be honest, I was raised in a family where spiritual concepts were like delivered like the alphabet was, right? Um, so, we spoke about life after life and soul and spirit and all of that. And it was always very appealing to me. But I actually remember this one time, and I've never spoken about this to anybody just till the recent past. Um, that one time when I don't know, I think I must have been 10, 11. And I had a conversation with somebody who said that the world is going to come to an end at some point. The earth is not going to exist. And I don't know what happened to me, but I completely remember myself kind of being like, no, that's not possible. And they said, no, but it is. If the earth is not there, you're not there. But I remember distinctly actually at that point going into like a trance and felt like it was just energy, me connected to a higher source that would exist beyond the planets. And I remember it very, very vividly. I don't know, it was not complete presence, it was not completely out, but I was somewhere in between where I felt that even if the earth didn't exist, even if nothing existed to begin with, I'm energy and there's this huge empty space that I exist in. And then it was a scary feeling for me. And I felt like that gave me a glimpse, but I wasn't sure what it meant. That being said, I think kept thinking about it for many, many years. I kept going back to it. And I think in the recent years, in the last 5 or 6 years, I've had some other experiences which have replicated that, the experience of really us at the most energetic level. Um, in this whole cosmos. And now finally, I was so much at ease once I could understand what that experience was. But I would say that's something true, that was a truly spiritual experience now when I look back, which made me realize that we are more than just what we think we are.
And how did you start to make sense of that experience? Because, like you said, that can be kind of scary to go through something like that and have a big question mark in your brain of like, what's going on here? So, did you tell your parents, grandparents, or later when you started to study different things, did you look back and connect the dots?
So I think I tried to talk to my dad, but I could not articulate it because I was like, Papa, I cannot explain what it is. I can't, but I know that we will exist. And I feel myself and I feel like it's just, but it's not my body, but I know we're there. And I could not articulate it. And I felt like it got a little frustrating. At times, I just denied myself that I had ever had that. Of course, I had had the experience, but I was like, oh, that was insignificant. It didn't matter. Um, and it didn't mean anything, but then it always remained with me. I always thought of it. I stopped asking questions about it, but at some point I became curious about it in a very genuine fashion. And I feel like eventually, when I did some of the meditations, and I was able to come to a point where you completely dissolve your body, at least in your energetic sphere, you dissolve your body. And I had the same feeling again. And I've been practicing Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, which is also inspired by the Vedic wisdom. But it's basically the ultimate truth where we are nothing. I mean, now quantum physics, all of that made sense. I'm so fortunate that in this lifetime, honestly, if this happened 100 years ago, I don't think we would have access to this information, or I would have arrived at this point in my life where it can become so comprehensible. But I think at the right time in my life, it was made comprehensible to me through these experiences, through some of the matter that I had read, through the whole rising of the concept of quantum physics, which did exist in the Vedic texts, but is back again. And I feel like now I'm completely comfortable with that experience. In fact, I think I can draw upon that very quickly when I sit to meditate and I want to go into that state of dissolution because of that earlier experience, which I had gone back to several times. It's very quick and it's very fast. I can very quickly go back into that, and I'm so grateful for it.
We love Dr. Joe too, and his meditations are amazing. So I love that you connect with them. Would you say that that moment when you were 10 years old was kind of the catalyst for you starting to be interested in the Vedic wisdom. And I know you grew up in a family that was full of Ayurvedic practitioners, so perhaps it was more of your family that was an influence. But how did those two experiences kind of come together to, help you realize that this is part of your dharmic path, is to teach and study these sciences and share them in the way that you do?
So, as a child, to be honest with you, I was a very mischievous child. The world was like a playground and I loved it. And I was always looking for something exciting and something adventurous. And um, I was fortunately a good student, but I didn't like to study. But the only time I found myself going into a daze, into a daydream, like where I feel like a lot of the learning happens through the front of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, where it's very intellectual. It's just it's on the surface, right? It's important, but it's on the surface. It doesn't go deep into the depths of your mind. And that's how I basically studied. I said, I'm just going to swallow this and vomit this. And literally, that's how I study for the most part. But when it came to some of these concepts, whether they were being told at home or whether it was in school, like we studied the four goals of human life at school, and I was in the 8th grade, and I remember just kind of getting lost in that, right? It went deep into my mind and it stayed with me and I loved it. And consistently, the concepts which really spoke to me was less to do with the world as it is today, but more to do with the world within. And I was not able to relate this experience that I had with these concepts for a while. They converged for me much later in my life, right? Because a lot of the concepts that were being told to me, right? Initially, it's about the kind of human being I should be, which yeah, and then there is talk about the soul. But then when they're talking so much about how you should operate in this world, then there's less conversation about the other world. But I think as my curiosity about these things kind of arose, and what really arose for me is what happens within people's worlds when they experience something outside. So before I actually went into Ayurveda, when I was back in India, I had a school called Vyaktitva. That's a Sanskrit word for personality and value system. So I worked with adolescents to explore their inner world. Right? I said, let's explore your inner world, because when you're going through the journey of adolescence, it can be very confusing, very disturbing, but the journey is not really outside. The journey of an adolescent is inside. They all go to school, they all go to college, they do the same things, but it's the journey within. So that's where, I was in my early 20s, just literally barely 21. And I had this little school where I started going into this journey within and talking Vedic wisdom. I had gone for Vipassana meditation when I was 15. And I think in those 10 days of the Vipassana meditation, I was able to again go into that dissolved experience where I felt connected to the source, but I still could not put it all together till much later. But all of these four parts continue to be, to grow at the same time, understanding the Vedas, working in the inner world in the more practical psychological fashion, my Vipassana meditation practice, and this experience that I had at the back. And I think it was only a matter of time when they all aligned and they all converged together, and everything now began to make sense. And it was not till my 30s till I had that experience.
I think it's so amazing that you are a mom doing all the work that you do. Like Rachel and I are always fascinated by moms, but you in particular, because I know that like raising kids Ayurvedically is just like a whole other world. But before you even get into the Ayurveda sector, since you are always have been immersed in spirituality your whole life, how do you infuse that with your kids?
So I think the most important part of spirituality, the meaning of spirituality, right, is not doing, it's being. And it actually makes it so much easier, right? Because when you can only be in your spirit, you can't do your spirit, right? And I think just only in the last 5 years, even though I have a 13-year-old, I would say in the last 5 years, I've been able to understand this more deeply. But all I have to do is not to do, is just to be. And parenting is so misunderstood because parenting is about just reparenting yourself.
Mm.
It's only you healing. And as you do that, as you keep going into your own journey of healing, your children heal, because all they really want is, I believe that every soul comes on this planet to experience the world and to understand themselves through it, and be able to untangle themselves, detangle themselves while experiencing the world. As parents, we can create more conditioning and tangling rather than the detangling. So, all they need is a loving witness who is also on a path. And as a parent, you're so energetically connected to your children that all you have to do is not be triggered. Let them go through their journey and work on yourself to have the patience that it takes to be a loving witness to their journeys. And I think that state of being, when you can establish it, and we have many moments where I feel like, I think that's the general culture of my family, even though we have moments where we're not like that. But it's the general culture of my family. And I can't say I'm raising my kids. I can just say we're all growing together.
Mhm.
I'm very, very grateful for that experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything else. And it makes it so much easier, to be honest with you.
Totally. Oh, I love that so much because it's all about embodying it. And when you just are that, like you don't, these rituals are so beautiful and you can do things like puja and meditation. But if you're not truly exemplifying it, that's what the energy you give off. And kids are also so malleable in that way. Like they're like sponges. So they are really just going to pick up on your body language and your energy and more so the subconscious patterns. So I'd love to hear what is your deconditioning process and how do you make time for that while being a mom?
Deconditioning process in terms of my own deconditioning.
Yeah.
So, to be honest with you, I have been very open to working with all kinds of therapists, right? So, I understand that it's creation of self awareness. The biggest lesson to me was just learning to feel all my feelings. And that's all I have to do on a daily basis. And whenever I need support, I'm very happy to go and get support. If I allow myself to feel all the feelings, behind the trigger is the truth. I have to sit through the trigger to come to the truth. I have to go through the pain to feel the power behind the pain. And when I need the support, I take the support. When I feel like I'm not ready to understand something in my life, I also have been honoring that and said, listen, I'm not ready to open this can of worms right now. So, universe, don't present it to me. I'm not just ready yet. And so I feel like it's just communication with the universe. It's just this constant. And so I feel like it's always worked. Like I will be like, hey, you know what? I'm getting curious about this department of my life. I'd like to know what am I missing? And I don't have to do any work. Then it just happens. I just have to maintain the integrity, I feel. So a lot of my deconditioning work and reconditioning work is about just becoming curious about myself, understanding what takes me off equilibrium. And that's where the magic lies. Those secrets lie in the moments when you're off equilibrium. It's a secret. And to be grateful for those experiences when you go off equilibrium, and to be willing to see the truth, to be willing to sit with that experience. And I feel like truly, life in the last few years has felt like this amazing, joyous adventure, but not the adrenaline rush adventure. It's more like a gratitude, heart opening adventure. And yeah, it's just the self awareness of when you go off equilibrium and having the curiosity to know what that's about.
Yeah, I love that. And especially the way you describe how it feels, because it's nice to know, like, after you've done all that work, there is an end goal. Because I think sometimes when you're in it, it feels mucky and yucky and it's easy to give up on it. So to know that you get to live in this heart opening place is really powerful, to know that there's that transformation. And maybe for someone listening, if they're kind of like, whoa, I'm totally new to this. I just started doing a lot of this work on myself. How the heck do I do this with my kids? Can you share maybe some of your stories of maybe the first time you did that with your kids and now what that practice looks like, as not only you've gotten wiser with it, but also your kids have grown older and established their own patterns in reconditioning? Because I assume that it hasn't always been easy, right? And especially when they're little and you're like, okay, trying to let them process, but they're throwing a tantrum, right? So what were some of the baby steps you took at first? We'll start there.
Yeah, and I'm going to try and recall, Rachel, but I will tell you that it has, even with the kids, right? It has always, so evolutionarily, right? When a child cries, a parent is supposed to feel stressed. It's not a sound you're supposed to like, because if we liked that sound, we would like just dismiss our kids' demands and needs because they cannot really verbally communicate at that point. So it's important parents are uncomfortable with crying children. So I think the first job is to become comfortable with the child's discomfort so that the child feels that it's okay to be uncomfortable. And it's kind of like that, right? Uncomfortable feelings, and I will break it down a little bit more practically by giving you examples, but the concept is that uncomfortable feelings are like a dark room, and no child wants to visit a dark room. Says, Mom, I don't want to go in the dark, I don't want to go in the dark. And you're like, don't go, it's okay, it's fine, let's not go to the dark room, right? Most of the times we don't want to deal with kids tantrums, and most of the times we don't want to deal with the dark room, so we say let's not visit the dark room. But the opposite is actually required, where we say, let's go to this dark room together. It's fine. I'm with you. You're going to go and explore. And similarly, when they're going through a tantrum, is an opportunity to heal. Actually, a child will only throw a tantrum, firstly, if he's safe enough, B, if he's triggered enough. And both of them are super news. They're those are the best things a child can do at a young age. When they throw a tantrum, here you have a chance to recondition and rewire. You're so close to, being the therapist for your child. So to allow that tantrum to happen, to allow the feeling of the tantrum to happen, to name the feelings that, oh, you're feeling extremely angry. This makes you very angry. And you'll see the child, as you connect, and sometimes I actually energetically connect my heart to my children's hearts. All they want to do is to be understood and to feel like it's okay to feel. I've had moments where, the child just melts when they feel understood. And I'm going to give you an example of this, right? I had a year when my younger one was born. And so my older one was 5, 4.5, maybe 5 that time. That Suhani was 5 and Sanjali was 1. And that was a very difficult year of my life. There was just a lot going on. And I lost my plot. I lost my mental game. And when I lost my mental game, I was this loving mother for the first 4 or 5 years of Suhani's life. I was just like, always loving and truly enjoying parenting, to like, this is so irritating, right? And then I think in that year, I was not my kindest self to Suhani. I was not my kindest self. I had said mean things to her. I was more aggressive than I want to be. And I was unkind. And she was a very sensitive child because she had received a lot of love. And then that was traumatizing for her that year, right? The person she loves the most has now done that. And of course, even though you course correct, the trauma stays with the child. Now, this is when she was 5 years old, right? It stayed with me. I knew it, right? And it comes out in resentment in places. It comes out in non-cooperation, but it lives inside. And I was waiting for a moment. I said, I want to create an environment where just patiently, where she's safe enough to bring that trauma up. And when she brings that trauma up, my job at that point is to just really sit patiently, allow her to feel that trauma. And that's usually what a tantrum looks like. Sure enough, she must have been about 9 or 10 years old. So that's literally 5 years later. And, after that experience, she had stopped liking to hug me so much. It's become a little less cuddly and a little bit more defensive. And then when she was around 10 years old, one day she picked something random and I forgot what it was. And she threw a major tantrum with it and saying all kinds of things to me. Mom, you're like this and you're this. And something in me told me that this is lingering. This is a lingering past, right? So I said, Suhani, I let her feel all her feelings. I said, I can see you're very angry at mommy, sweetie. And I know that, the way you feel, I'm going to honor that. I'm going to try and understand. And I really did. From the bottom of my heart, I was genuinely present for her. And then she had a moment where she just melted. And she cried and she came into my arms. And she asked me point blank that, Mom, you know, you remember when I was in the first grade, Mom, you were so mean to me. And I said, yeah, Suhani, that was, I will, you know, that's one thing Mama really feels. I wish I could turn that back in time, that none of that was your fault. And Mummy, you know, had her own issues and I did not deal with them properly. And you know, it came out on you and I'm sorry for what you, so that conversation, right, changed everything. So when your child throws a tantrum, it's an opportunity. They're safe enough with you and there's something that they need to heal from. Honor them both. And if we honor them both, then if they're not honored, the child is going to get into addictions as an adult because those feelings are still painful and there's no safe place to express them. Alcohol, marijuana will all feel lovely because for a few moments they can go away from those feelings. But if we give them the opportunity to throw the tantrum in a safe way, and of course we make behavioral corrections after the fact. We say, hey, how could we have done this in a less destructive manner, right? Or what could we have done differently? We of course need some clear rules and ground rules that, for example, when we are angry, we don't, you know, hands are not raised when you're angry or when anybody is angry in this house. And the universal rules, kids do really well with universal rules. But still to be allowed to express, and then after that being taught healthy ways to express are extremely important. The journey is easier than it sounds, to be honest with you. It sounds very complicated, but as we are just brave enough to work on ourselves and have the patience that it takes to let these things unfold and manifest, magic happens, like real magic happens. It's just a reminder that this is, you know, the journey is about me healing, not imposing.
Yeah, that story is so amazing for a lot of reasons. And the biggest one being that you were such a good example of getting out of the way. So your ego wasn't, it might have felt guilty or ashamed or whatever happened when she was 5 years old, but you worked through that yourself so that whenever the time came for you two to have that conversation, then it didn't have to be about you, right? Because you'd already let go of those things where you're like, okay, I know this is how I acted. Now it's about you. So that just highlights why it's so important to work on yourself. And the second piece being how patient you were. So I can imagine as a mother, you know, 5 years to wait from age 5 to age 9 or 10, just having this experience and you remembering it and knowing that's what she needed. Like, that's incredible to be connected in that way as a mom and know, like, hey, it's maybe connected to this thing back here. And so if she wants to talk about that, I'm going to let her talk about it and then we can let it go. So all of that is just really powerful. And I wanted to like almost hit on those points again. But something you said was interesting, where it makes so much sense that the temper tantrum is powerful because they're having that reaction. You know how they're feeling. You can start to name it. What about a child who's more in the repressive nature, where it's really hard to know what they're thinking and maybe they're not showing that emotion, or you don't know how to name it because it doesn't seem like anything's happening beneath the surface, but you know that there is something happening?
Right. And of course, right, that's always going to be the case, that it's hard to understand our feelings and name our feelings, especially when you're not used to, even as adults, right? But again, it takes that creation of a safe environment with the parents starting to lead, to embody that and be honest about their own feelings, right? Like, there are times that I need to sleep. I want to sleep at 9:30 and Suhani is awake till 10 doing her homework. And I'm honest, I said, Su, Mama needs to sleep. I'm really tired. And I actually tell my girl that Mama is going to get horns and claws and fangs if I don't go to sleep, right? So I think part of it is like being honest about your own feelings and creating that safe environment. Because I'll tell you, as human beings, the plant wants to grow. Everybody wants to grow. I mean, your basic nature is to grow, is to express, to evolve. That's your basic nature. That can't be changed. We can only suppress it. So if a child has been repressed, has had trauma, I think once again, the mother has a great opportunity to be like, anything can be rectified. Honestly, I'm 40 years old. My mom's sitting in India. When she heals, I heal till today, right? She's sitting 7 countries apart, like 7 seas apart, and we can still really heal each other. I mean, when she heals, I can see a drastic shift in my own energetic field. That's the great. This is the only relationship on the planet which has so much unity in terms of energy. So if there has been repression, I'd say you start by setting example yourself, right? And by being kind to the child when he's like, hey, would you like to talk? And the child may say no 10 times. and say, is there something that I can help you with? Even like I ask my kids to journal. And I think that's huge. If the child is not comfortable connecting with you, everybody sits together and journal. And I give my kids prompts. Sorry, I give them prompts, right? Like, and it could be something as simple as, what about school did you like today? To like, what made you uncomfortable today? But you start them to start thinking about these things. If the conversation is difficult, the feelings, they may not be able to name the feelings, right? They may say the same thing for all the feelings. They may have only one word, happy and sad, right? And that's fine. But then you start building it up. That was this sad different from that sad? You won't read their journals, but when they start talking about sadness, for example, you say, does this sad feel different from the movie sad that you felt? How is it different? So we become, you arouse their own curiosity about themselves and give them that space and that playground to be able to do that. And I feel like it's possible to come back. I've seen people at 45 work on tremendous child abuse that they've had and come back from it. As parents, it's very easy to come back from anything that has happened. I know I'm divorced now, and it's been 2-3 years that I've been separated. And the conversations that we've had around it, I mean, I just have been so powerful, and it's been so empowering for my children. I mean, I cannot even believe that it was possible to conduct or for this to happen in the way it has, So everything is possible. People lie to you when you say that healing is always possible, always.
I'm curious because there's always connections between our emotions and even the doshas. And so in Ayurveda, we say like emotions like resentment and suppressing can be related to Kapha dosha, and anger and frustration is Pitta, and feeling anxious and overwhelmed is Vata. Have you noticed that these emotions have also been linked to imbalances in the physical body for your kids? So they were holding on to resentment, for example. Have you noticed that they were taking on more Kapha imbalances?
Yes, I would say that's more even for adults and your lifelong tendencies, right? Because sometimes for kids, holding back, yes, it can be their natural nature. You're absolutely right if they're more in that kapha body zone and mind zone. But also sometimes it's because they're not allowed to express, right? That can also create that same. And what happens, right? Let's just say somebody is born balanced, vata, pitta, kapha, but they're born in an environment where they're not allowed to express. As children, you end up eating your feelings through food, right? You swallow down a feeling through a bite of food. Then you kind of are adding that bulk even in your physical body. Then you kind of create that kapha imbalance for you, right? So it can even start out by just saying that I'm not allowed to express. So I'm going to now feel, instead of feeling this feeling, I'm going to eat this feeling with the food. And you have an eating disorder in that case. And then you fill yourself and go into that sluggishness of the kapha, right? So, but absolutely, I myself ask people, what is their dominant emotion? Is it anxiety? Is it anger? Is it withdrawal or depression? And that always gives me somewhat of an insight into their nervous system of where their dosha lies, what is their tendency. So you're absolutely right. The emotions are very closely linked to doshas. I see that with my 2 girls as well. One is more vata, secondary pitta, much more the anxious type. The pitta makes her stubborn, but the vata has that anxiety. And my younger one is she's a firecracker. So but she's also very compassionate. So anger is her predominant emotion, and they're both fine. I mean, for me, I have a harder time dealing with anxiety than I have. Nothing in the world makes me anxious, but when Suhani is anxious, I see myself getting anxious. So the work I have to do is on myself. She still has to go through her journey the way she needs to go through. But I realize that the work I need to do is with being okay with her anxiety. That's really what we need.
Totally. I imagine that would be such a challenge because I already feel that like with my mom, I'm like, okay, my mom's going through something that's different than what I'm feeling. I can imagine like even from my mom's perspective, that's like on a whole new level of attachment because yeah, they're your kid. They're just like they're there with you all the time.
Yeah. But it's great. It's a great opportunity. I think it's just lovely to have that opportunity to look at yourself so up close and personally in the mirror as a mother.
Definitely. what are some of your favorite Ayurvedic practices that you share with your kids?
So there are more principles that we do in terms of practices. I'll be honest with you. We've kind of slowed down. Sanjali is going to be 10 almost. She's 9 now. And Suhani is going to be 14. But oil massages and hair oil massages are something that they're really, really big on still. Whenever we can, when we are traveling, we absolutely indulge in those. And even for me, even like, Sunday, we'll have a Sunday evening. I'll give them a nice long massage, often oiling their feet as well. And I think it's actually a practice that goes a long way. Just the oil massages is one simple practice, which goes a really long way. Besides and beyond that, some of the things that we do inculcate in our lives pretty regularly are listening to water sounds. It's not really Ayurvedic, but that's something that we do. A little bit of lavender essential oil and water sounds. Like the girls will put on their own water sounds now whenever they feel like they need to sleep deeper. We'll always do warm beverages. So our milk is always warm in the morning. The principles are intact, right? Where the girls know that they don't, very simple. And this is how I grew up. And it was so easy because wellness was not fear-based. I think I don't want to raise kids where you have this rule and you have that rule. We have principles and then we have fun around it. So wellness is the freedom that comes from being well. It's not the fear of disease. And that's how I was raised, and that's how I want to raise the girls. So the principles are, for example, that simple, we all do it, that you never shower if you've just eaten. So it's always a rule that you first go into the shower, then you get to the table. And the girls know that, and it doesn't feel like a chore. It's always happened that the milk will always be hot. Morning is the heavier meal than the evening. People that you don't mix milk with other kind of foods, you have it independently. And if you want to indulge, right? So if the girls want to indulge in the gelato and ice cream, we'll prefer to do it not in the winter months, as they're getting older, but they can make their own judgment. I give it completely. They've already learned the principles. Now the judgment is theirs. So the girls will know to come back and they'll make their own tea. They'll heat the hot water kettle. They'll make their own tea. They'll put tulsi in it, where they'll know they've had something cold. They want to have something warm. They actually have learned intuitively and also through what we've done over the years with how to balance things off, how to balance something cold with something warm, how to balance something heavy with something light. It's really cute that they've seen me and their dad always exercising. They both have their morning routines where they've created their own exercise routines. And it's a lot of, in my family, it's a lot of like, you figure it out. Like you have this whole a la carte of things that you have, some principles that we all follow, and otherwise it's a whole a la carte menu. You pick what you want to do. We also like journaling. Again, it's non-Ayurvedic, but we also like journaling and meditations and breath work. Not super regular, but they're definitely skills that the girls have learned and can call upon anytime.
That's so cool. And I think it's really amazing that they get to start that as kids when it becomes and stays so intuitive, so that like you mentioned, when things get repressed or you don't understand your body or what it needs or how to keep it in that equilibrium, then later as adults, you start to find yourself, even if not in an eating disorder, maybe disordered eating. I know that was personally my journey. And I think the reason was I didn't understand how to take care of my body at that younger age. I didn't know what it needed. And so when I got to the point where I was an adult later and I started looking for all of these things, diets, practices outside of myself, like I wasn't even in tune enough with my body to know, hey, even though someone else, this was right for them, like this is actually exacerbating your symptoms and it's making things worse for you. And so I think as children, when you learn to do that, and like I'd love to see this for future generations, like just teaching them something as simple as, hey, this is the quality that you're experiencing today. It's the anxiety, it's that coolness, it's this dryness, and here are some balancing things. So, to take your warm meal and drinks, to maybe do that oil massage to reconnect to your body. And that's really powerful. And that's one of the things I love about the way that you teach is I think as a lot of people are finding Ayurveda now as adults, it's kind of like applying that more rigid way of putting it into their life. But as children, it can be like playful and fun, and they can connect with it in a way that's really natural. So have you maybe noticed a difference from growing up with more of an Indian family and people just using it as a way to stay healthy and thrive in their lives versus in the Western world, it's more of something used to like be in that perfect health and eat exactly right and kind of like that different mentality around it?
Such a different mentality, right, Rachel? I mean, I grew up in my own bubble, even though I grew up in a family of 14 people and joint family and so many relatives all around. But the general understanding was that it's all about self-awareness. It's about understanding what your body does and what its tendency is. And then you're smart, like you've discovered a code and you work according to that code. And it's so easy, right? Nothing else matters. There's an article on kale, article on quinoa, article on blueberries. It doesn't matter. Is it applicable to you is the question that you got to ask, you know? And that's the kind of and then having spirituality with it was beautiful, right? Because that anyways talks about self-awareness. So you're on this path of self-awareness in your body and your mind and your spirit, and then you have all of these great tools that Ayurveda presents, that now you're self-aware and now you know the antidote. And when I moved to the US and I really got out there in the world in general, I realized that for most people, it was just the fear of disease. It was not like the freedom from that comes from being well. And absolutely, even here in the West, when I see when people try to follow Ayurveda, unfortunately, it's taught in a very academic fashion. One of the things that I do is I want to teach Ayurveda in an immersive fashion, learn it like it's a first language. You know, the grammar is not hard, and it's just, and that's how Ayurveda is written from the Vedas. The Vedas were written understanding the macro and the micro, that such as is the macro, such is the micro, as is the micro, such is the macro. So you just understand the macro and you understand the micro, and you just understand this whole rhythm and this pattern. And it's like music, you know, you play with the rhythm. And it is really, I feel like, honestly, it is really that simple. We've overcomplicated things. The other example that I like to use, and I know it's a little off topic, but I really like to use this. Some of the most complicated processes on the world are just the most intuitive, right? Like a child nursing. The only thing the child needs to survive is nourishment. A baby is born, already knows that it uses this mouth to suckle and feed himself, right? So it's intuitively known. When two people have intercourse, they completely get lost. There is no intellect involved. And by that one process, which is so natural and organic, and birds and bees and animals, they all understand that you can procreate, which is such a complex thing. You can't do it in a laboratory, but it is so intuitive. Most of the things are super intuitive. All we have to do is awaken our intuition again. We awaken our intuition again because we've overcomplicated things, and it becomes such a joyful journey.
Mm. I love that perspective, and that's so powerful. And I kind of want to use that to lead into my next question, which is around something that I don't think is talked about very often, but in the same vein as motherhood. Like, a lot of moms and women in our community are either about to go through menopause or are going through menopause. And I just love your perspective, not only from like the Ayurvedic practices you can do to support yourself, but also how you can nourish yourself energetically and spiritually during this time, because it feels taboo. Like, people don't want to go through that, or they don't want to talk about it. And so what's a meaningful way to nourish yourself during this transition and to support that part of your life?
So, you know, for that, Rachel, the first thing that I want to say is when you hit menopause, right? Like the two elements that come together to sustain youth, it's the pitta time of life. But even if somebody who doesn't understand that, the two elements that come together are fire and water, like a fire and a fuel, right? So keep the fire burning over these years of conception. So your fertile years or your youth is basically that fuel, and it holds that fire. How long can the fuel hold the fire? Think of it like an oil lamp. And that's what determines the longevity or the quality of your youth. And when you hit menopause, that fuel is kind of burnt out, right? You become drier. You know, as a young teenager, you have all supple skin. Everything is supple, collagen, and, you know, everything is just supple and hot, right? Because the flame is full and the fuel is full. And then as we hit, as slowly the flame burns out, the fuel decreases. When you hit menopause, the fuel is gone. Then there's a sharp flame that happens. That's why the hot flashes, just a crackling flame, I say. And then the vada, everything goes cold. So the reason I say this, right, and I say that we start out as grapes in the beginning of your youth, you end up as a raisin, literally in the physical appearance, wrinkled at the end, because it's the depletion of the fuel. So it's keeping that fuel alive, right? It's keeping that fuel alive through your youth, through your menopause, if you want to be nourished on the other side. And few of the weeks that I said, you have to eat good fats and you have to exercise. So a lot of people are like, oh my God, because, menopause has a tendency to kind of dump pounds in places you don't want. And people completely stop eating fat, which is which is contraindicated because you're drying yourself even further. I say do plenty of oil massages. Oil massages should become your friend. Head oil massage, body massage, even vaginal oil tampons. They are the treatments in Ayurveda, yoni pichu. As much oil as you can get on your body, moderate good fats in your body through nuts, through other good sources, and continuing to exercise. And be really loving to yourself, knowing what you're experiencing, that it is a life shift. We really like, oh, my period, it's just normal. It's a natural part of the process. I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to go to work. Oh, it's menopause. Everything is natural. So is an earthquake. So is the tsunami. So is the tornado and the hurricane. They're all part of nature's processes. Does not mean you don't brace yourself for them. Similarly, when we hit menopause, just really honor that you're going to have unique needs. It's really as big or even bigger than having a child. So really to honor that with a lot of self-love. Abhyanga is also called snehana. Snehana means love. Give yourself that self-love with oil massages. And of course, breath work. I think alternate nostril breathing is huge. Really connecting and taking this as an opportunity. The one thing that I say is just be really happy about it. Know that you'll go through this process. But now, for the first time since adolescence, we are built to look for a mate. You're just built, right? Because it's your conception years. You're subconsciously always seeking a mate. And, you assume that role, that nesting phase. And it's a time you're in a different phase of life. You've done a lot of your duties as a woman, so as to say, in a biological fashion. And now you have time to yourself to really explore who you are in a deeper manner, and your pursuits and your desires and your hobbies. So honor that side and honor that opportunity with self-love. Menopause is more about honoring yourself than anything else.
Yeah, I love that you keep coming back to the concept of self-love, even though I know that can be, used a lot. But I think that it's really important that women come to this state of acceptance. Like you said, like come to love this state and be appreciative to what is happening in the now. Because I think what often happens is mothers go through this identity crisis where they're unable to let go of their past life. They're unable to let go of what their life was like when they were fertile, whether that was their kids in their home and having the home that was loud and they were caring for their kids, or whether that was they felt like they looked a certain way that they really identified with. And all that is so great, but unless you have this constant shedding process, and we go through so many transformations in our life, but that point in our life is so poignant, and it's such a beautiful opportunity to really begin to shed and then step into what is this new identity with myself. Like, how can I be a new version of my mom? And I'd love to hear if you've experienced that with any of your clients, that kind of like identity crisis, and if Ayurveda has helped them process that more.
Right, absolutely. And that's very truly said. And I think most of the work for that, so if you're going to hit menopause in your, let's say, late 40s to 50s, the work actually begins in 30s, to learning to identify that you're more than just your body, right? That whole message. And yes, that identity crisis does happen. And I think Ayurveda and a whole overall Vedic way of being, right, has definitely helped clients, people that I've worked with, of course, given the amount of work that they put in, is to understand that for the sake of convenience, there's a chronology to the events that occur in the life outside. You said, oh, you get married, you have children, you have a job. But in the world of in the spiritual realm, there is no chronology. There is nothing. You become a dancer at 60. It's just always honoring the baggage you carry and the work that you need to do, and not enjoying things that are transient, but remaining not too attached, right? So we are supposed to experience the world. I'm going to play with my toys as a 3-year-old, and I'm going to love my toys, knowing that I will not play with the same toys as a 5-year-old. So, it's not a concept which is very rigid and which is very strict. or dogmatic. It's just, it's taking the ride, knowing that the ride will end. So there is something cultivating what is within constantly and consistently. So the identity crisis doesn't happen. Identity crisis happens when you try to label, really match yourself according to the expectations of the world, but are feeling different. Oh, I don't feel like this, but I'm supposed to be feeling that way. And then there's this big war that happens within. But I feel once we really get closer, self-discovery is the solution to identity crisis. We don't really even know our identity. When we go into self-discovery and start loving what we see, when we pull out our baggage, I mean, you really meet yourself then. The identity crisis is with the world. Meeting yourself through this process is amazing. It can happen during menopause, before, after. I think menopause is actually one of the most wonderful times, like you said, because as mothers, our identity is tied into our children. It's supposed to be that way for survival. And it's a great opportunity to now break out of it and let them evolve and bud, and you evolve and bud, and it's all possible. And I've seen my aunts do it. My aunt who's 60, my mom who's 68, and another aunt who's in her early 60s. And I've seen how lovely they have second lives after their menopause, and it's amazing.
Yeah, if you have any specific examples of how women have redefined themselves, I think that could be really expansive for our moms to show them what's possible.
Okay, I'm going to try and think of what it is mainly rewriting the script, right? I can think of somebody who doesn't live here in the US, was completely mother of two boys, and is in her mid 40s, right? So more perimenopausal than menopausal, and in a constant rut of, this is what is expected out of me, am I delivering? I think the whole story in her life was, this is what is expected out of me, am I delivering? And she delivered each time. She pleased everybody else around her. And great wife, great mother, great homemaker, great for the society, but broken inside, right? This is what I'm doing, but I should be feeling different if everything else is turning out in my life well, right? And then when we started working together, and of course a lot of this is her own work as well, right? Because she chose to come and take help, because she said, I don't want to feel like this anymore. And when we did work together, and we were able to break open some of that. In fact, even sometimes it's just a mechanical practice by saying, take some time to go and exercise. It begins just there. It begins with saying, I'm going to now do something which is not an external validation or expectation. It's for me within. And we literally started with very simple things as exercising and journaling and breath work. These are the things. When she started feeling gently comfortable being in a space where she had to face herself, she's feeling good exercising, feeling lazy before exercise, she had to get in touch with her own feelings through her journaling. Breath work kept her still. So as she created space for herself and feeling those feelings, more and more came up for her, and she discovered life on the other side. Practices, keeping your health, your body is a vehicle. So keeping your health intact to experience what you need to experience in the world is very important. I think because she also felt empowered now, because we had done self-discovery even at a physical level, that was one thing that was taken off. As she hit mid-40s, she said, oh my God, I'm aging and I'm running the show. How am I going to do this? Then she realized she doesn't have to run the show, but she also realized that she can honor her body, and it's easier than she thinks. And then she also realized that there's space that I've created to see what's inside me and what's on the other side of the wall. And it became more and more and more and more comfortable with all the tools that were required. And then once you hit a breakthrough point, right, in any of this manner, and you'd always do, there's a breakthrough point where you have an aha moment. And then it's an endless journey. Then there's no coming back. And I think, while I can't, of course, share names and extreme details, but it's one of my favorite experiences that I've gotten to witness is going through this. So it's possible for all of us. And we really just start by making time for us in whichever way we need to.
Wow, that's so inspiring. And like you said, not just for people going through those transitions, but really at any point in their life. So it's really cool to hear those things and know that it's possible at any point to start to get curious and go inward and make a new life for yourself. It can be as simple as that. Um,
Yeah.
so I just
Can
want,
I just say one thing here? Can I say one thing here? Because
yeah,
I've spoken so much about going inward, and I want to say from my own experience, when I used to hear about going inward, I was like, oh my God, it's so boring. I mean, there was like, it's so dark and like dumb and dull. You know, that's how I felt. But what I want to tell you, and what I want to tell our listeners is like, hello, going inwards, it's just going to give you more fun outside, right? Because now you have the power to really like in manifest, control your journey, find those synchronicities. And it's not like you're planning, but it's just like the adventure of the world becomes so much more exciting. Today, I enjoy the world so much more than I did in the past because I'm okay with what it presents. I'm brave enough to see what it presents. So I will take more chances. I will go on more adventures. So going inside will make the journey outside much better. It's not about, I'm not going to the Himalayas. I'm not ready for that. But and you don't have to. You can live in New York City in this world and still make those two journeys together.
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, lovely. She's here again.
That was so weird. We're back. Everyone, little Mercury retrograde happening to me, kicking me out and putting me back on. But yeah, the one thing I want to say about Nidhi is just like one of those things where you have to really go deep into the depths and the lows to experience the highs. So when you can experience the full spectrum of things, of course they get brighter, more vibrant, more alive because you've opened yourself to like that broader scale, which I think is really cool. And I love how you so beautifully articulated that.
Thank you.
And we'd love to just finish out by having you share with everyone what you're up to, where they can find you, all of that good stuff.
So I basically, you can find me blogging on my Instagram or very often all the time. That's one place where you'll find me updated. What I also work with people and I take them on this journey of mind-body transformation, self-discovery, tools for your body, tools for your mind, understanding your tendencies. And it basically empowers them to navigate through life, outside and inside, in a much more joyful manner. That's one of the things that I really enjoy doing. I work with only a handful of people a month, but that's one thing. The other thing that I do is a course where I have, it's available online for purchase. It's a self-paced course where I've taught Ayurveda through immersion, where it's like I said, learning like your first language, not a new language. Imbibing these principles very intuitively. It's full of tools, recipes, pantry lists, ailments, everything, you name it. Of course, it starts at a very fundamental granular understanding. It's more deep than wide, but it's all you need to know to live Ayurvedically in the most easiest, sustainable manner. I've poured my heart into it. And that's something that I always tell people to do. You can find the link in my Instagram bio. It's nidhipandya.podia.com. I'm also always constantly doing workshops. Right now I'm working on a couple of books, as well as a whole new method of looking at our body. That's something, it's a concept that I'm working on. It's called the inner climate. And those are all the things that are all hopefully happening, ripening, and ready to really take off till by next year. But as of now, it's my programs and it's my courses online, my workshops that I keep doing every now and then, and my blog.
I love it. So many good things in the works, and we're really excited to see what comes out next year and follow you and support you in that. And thank you just so much for being on the show and for sharing your stories and your wisdom with everyone. It's been so fun to have you, and everyone, we will see you next week